with her multiple times, even in July. I kept not like working out, whatever. I kept making back up. Mackenzie's known to be the kind of person that she's let us know she will never let go of Dom. If she has to let go of Dom, she will not go on living herself. To me, it seems like they were in a fight. I think that she took it upon herself to purposely crash into that wall.
That was in your car, do not let me in the house. If you don't let me in the house, yes.
Then Dominic's friend, Christopher Martin, testified about a disturbing incident that happened 2 weeks before the crash. On July 17, 2022, while driving with Dominic, Mackenzie threatened to crash the car. Dominic contacted for help, and that's when Christopher rushed to pick him up. While on the phone, he heard Mackenzie's threat where she said, "I will crash this car right now." Moreover, they revealed that Mackenzie had visited the crash site just 3 days prior, supported by data from her cell phone. This indicated prior knowledge of the area and implied a calculated plan. The prosecution presented disturbing glimpses of the defendant's behavior. Shortly after her hospital release, police received videos in which Mackenzie was seen attending a concert while being in a wheelchair.
I'm introducing this to the court to show the shocking lack of remorse. This was something that was being exhibited while the investigation was still going on, before she was charged and arrested in November of last year.
Furthermore, Mackenzie was observed to be active on TikTok even after the tragic incident. On Halloween, before facing charges, she made transition videos with her friends. But Mackenzie's mother, Natalie Schirla, stepped forward to share a different narrative before the court.
It's Halloween. We've been waiting for 3 months crying, only listening to his music. Please go have just a moment of fun. A moment of fun. So we told her to go. My husband drove her. I brought her back home. She just needed a second of fun from losing her whole world. Her whole world. So that was us. We told her to go. And that concert she went to with Dom's cousin, Abby, they picked her up. They brought her there. That was Dom, Mackenzie and Dom and Abby all decided to go to this concert together while they were in the hospital. That was for Dom. Everything she did after the accident was either an honor of him, to be close to him, or just be by him any way that she can.
Natalie further revealed that Mackenzie suffered from POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a condition known to cause dizziness and other debilitating symptoms. She also addressed the families of the victims, where she expressed regret.
I just want to say to the families that I'm broken, sad, and lost, and my heart hurts for everyone, okay? Davian was her new friend, and Dom was the love of her life, and he was part of our family, okay? I'm just so sorry that this happened, and we're heartbroken, okay? For 3 months, crying, there was a shrine of him next to her with photos and things that he liked, and this flower that lights up that he got her because he wanted it to be fresh and alive forever. It's like a little Beauty and the Beast flower. Okay, she's got this shrine of him next to her.
When Dominic's mother, Christine Russo, took the stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted.
But this was not a car accident. The evidence and science proved that Mackenzie Schirla murdered my son, Dominic, as well as Davian. No one can imagine the pain of losing a child unless they have lost one themselves. The pain is forevermore. Time does not heal this wound. Mackenzie, going to prison because you did this. Be thankful that you're still alive and have a future, whatever that may be. Dom and Davian were robbed of their futures, their hopes, and their dreams. Mackenzie showed no mercy on Dominic, nor did she on Davian. Only God at this time can have mercy on her soul. Thank you.
Then Dominic's older brother, Angelo Russo, stepped forward. He revealed a shocking statement Mackenzie made immediately after the crash.
Mackenzie's statement in the hospital to Detective Azu, "Can't you just take my license away for 10 years or something?" That statement is Mackenzie Schirla. The most selfish person I know. Ironically, Dom was the most selfless person I know. She was driving, going to concerts, and dressing up for Halloween. No thoughts of the families and lives that she had destroyed.
Later, Davian's mother, Jamie Flanagan, also took the stand to speak about her son.
So many dreams shattered, a future stolen. We will never get to see the amazing man that he was surely to become. I pray daily for strength and perseverance for myself and for my family. I also pray that Mackenzie will find true remorse in her heart and true repentance. We thank all of those that worked so hard to help us bring justice for our son.
After the conclusion of all the testimonies, the courtroom braced for the final verdict. But there was one last person who was left to speak.
The family of God and Davia, I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. And to my family, thank you for the support and all the love you guys give. Thank you for fighting with me. I love you all so much. Thank you.
Everybody waited for answers. Would Mackenzie escape the clutches of justice? Or would she finally be held accountable for her actions? In the end, justice prevailed as the judge delivered the verdict on August 21st, 2023.
The defendant controlled all the events. She chose the day. Specifically, she chose a day just before her 18th birthday. She chose to drive the car, the time to drive the car. She chose an obscure, previously scouted route through an industrial parkway. She chose the target to hit and the victims. She chose the means and the method to follow through. And she planned and purposefully executed the events of July 31st, 2022.
She was sentenced to 2 concurrent life terms with a possibility of parole after 15 years during her sentencing hearing. She was found guilty of 4 counts each of murder and felonious assault, as well as aggravated vehicular homicide and other offenses.
I understand that the pain in this room wants me to impose the harshest sentence. But I don't believe that would be an appropriate sentence, because I do believe that Mackenzie will not be out of 15 years. So she's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life, to be served concurrent to each other with credit for time served.
We are just thankful that we feel justice was served today. There's not a day that goes by that we don't miss our son, and justice was served for him today. But honestly, there's no winners here. There's no winners here today.
Despite the sentencing, it's hard to overlook the actions of Mackenzie Shirilla that led to such a tragic outcome. Her reckless decisions not only ended the lives of Dominic and Davion, but also shattered the hopes and dreams of their families. While the sentencing of Mackenzie Shirilla brought a measure of closure and justice to the grieving families, it can never undo the irreversible loss of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan.
You ever just wanna... Yeah, that's fall in Pennsylvania. You can't spell plaid without PA, and that's no coincidence. There's a reason folks fawn over our foliage, pine for our pumpkins, and sigh for our apple cider donuts. Fall is just fallier here. It's almost not fair to the other states, so get here. Pennsylvania, the great American getaway.
Introducing Color FX by Impress. The no-glue mani with high-def chromatic and metallic effects. Go where polish can't with a flawless look and superior hold for up to 7 days. Get yours today at ImpressBeauty.com.
I pulled your car over because it matches the suspect. Get your hand in your pocket. What, are you crazy? Get over here. Hey, get over here. Come on, run. Hey, release the dog.
This is 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland, and as he tried to flee from the police, this would prove to be his biggest mistake. When officers searched his car, they found several alarming items which were pointing towards something sinister. He immediately became a prime suspect in Samantha Josephson's case, who was last seen outside Bird's Dog Lounge. But the situation became even more disturbing when her friends made this 911 call.
911 emergency. Hi, we were just gonna call to let you know our friend is missing. We went out in 5 Points last night, and she still hasn't made it home. Her phone's dead.
On the evening of March 28th, Samantha was feeling down after receiving some bad news from home. Seeking comfort, she asked her boyfriend, Greg Corbishley, to come to the University of South Carolina, USC, to spend the night with her. Unfortunately, Greg was already busy. He graduated the previous December and lived with his family in Charleston, South Carolina. Although he often made the 2-hour drive to Columbia to see Samantha, he turned her suggestion down this time because both of them were already planning to meet up in a couple of days for a trip together. Greg suggested that Samantha should go out with friends to lift her spirits. He reassured her they could stay in touch through texts all night, as he was just a phone screen away. Samantha took his advice and went out, hoping to distract herself. Little did anyone know that this decision would lead to devastating consequences. Samantha and her friends decided to head to 5 Points, a lively area in Columbia known for its vibrant student scene. This spot was a favorite among USC students because it's so close to campus and filled with shops, restaurants, and bars. Samantha and her friends often hung out there, and it was actually the place where she first met her boyfriend, Greg. That night, Samantha got ready in a pair of black pants, platform sandals, and a bright orange top that made her stand out. Before hitting the bars, the group stopped at their friend Edgar's house. They spent some time there before making the short 2-minute walk to 5 Points. Everything was going as planned. After leaving Edgar's house around 12:30 a.m., Samantha and her friends walked straight to the Bird Dog Lounge, a popular bar in 5 Points. The Bird Dog was one of their favorite places to hang out at night. It was always buzzing with students, and the lively music together with cheap drinks created a lively, fun-filled atmosphere. However, even with the excitement around her, Samantha's friends noticed that she still wasn't in the happiest of moods. The worries she'd shared with Greg earlier in the evening seemed to be weighing heavily on her mind. As Samantha sat in the corner of the bar, she kept messaging Greg and others on her phone. Despite the efforts to distract herself, Samantha couldn't shake off her sadness. Then, later in the night, she accidentally got separated from her friends, which made her even more alone and upset. So, around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to call it a night, headed home, and called Greg to let him know. Living a couple of miles away on Main Street, she ordered an Uber for a safe ride back to her apartment. This decision marked the beginning of a fateful night that would change everything. At 2:06 a.m., Samantha was still on the call with Greg as she waited for her Uber ride, and Greg was keeping her company virtually. Suddenly, after about 12 minutes, Samantha's Uber driver arrived. The driver pulled into the disabled parking bay, but before the car could fully stop, Samantha leapt towards it. She flung open the passenger door and hopped inside. Within seconds, the car door closed, and it sped off towards the southeast on Hardin Street. However, Greg quickly sensed that something was amiss with Samantha's trip. Despite their recent phone call, he began tracking her using the Find My Friends app installed on their phones for safety. This app allowed them to monitor each other's locations in case of emergencies or concerns. Suddenly, Greg noticed that Samantha's Uber ride was heading south, away from her home, which was located north of the 5 Points area. Being concerned, he immediately called and texted Samantha, but received no response. Trying to stay calm, Greg considered the possibility that Samantha might have changed her plans and gone to Edgar's house or to another friend's place. He hoped that Samantha was safe and simply forgot to respond, but he couldn't shake off the growing worry in his mind. Greg made every effort to reach Samantha, using various communication methods like calls, texts, and even Snapchat. He wanted to ensure that everything was all right before jumping to conclusions. Despite his persistent attempts, Samantha didn't respond, and time continued to pass without any word from her. Greg's concern grew as he anxiously waited for any sign of Samantha's safety. Now, Samantha usually had her receipts turned on, so Greg could see when she read his messages, but now they remained unread. Despite Greg's attempts to reach out, there was no clue of Samantha. Meanwhile, her location kept moving in the totally opposite direction from her apartment, heading southeast through neighborhoods like Shandon and Rosewood. Then, at 2:30 a.m., a sudden and alarming event occurred. Samantha's location stopped updating altogether. This was completely unprecedented since the time Samantha and Greg began their relationship. Her location abruptly halted when she was on Montgomery Avenue, about 3 miles away from the 5 Points area. Fearing the worst, Greg reached out to Samantha's friends and roommates, only to discover that they hadn't realized she was missing. Since Samantha shared her location with her friends too, they all checked and saw that her location had also stopped around Montgomery Avenue. Immediately, they decided to drive to the area to search for her, but despite their efforts, they couldn't find her, nor did anything around seem suspicious. However, they did notice an old abandoned house nearby, along with a sorority house next to it. There were a few cars parked around, but nothing else seemed out of place. They began to speculate that Samantha might have left her phone in the Uber, and perhaps it had died, explaining why she couldn't respond to calls or texts. They were convinced that Samantha would have made it home safely and was probably asleep, so they reassured Greg not to worry. Being relieved, Greg eventually fell asleep, thinking Samantha would surely connect with them in the morning. As the night wore on, Samantha's friends and roommates returned home, unaware that Samantha hadn't made it back yet. It was nearly 5 a.m., and after a night of heavy drinking, they weren't thinking clearly. One roommate noticed Samantha's bedroom door was open, indicating she hadn't returned, but being too tired to dwell on it, they all went straight to bed. When they woke up around 10:30 a.m., they noticed Samantha's door was still open and her work shoes were out. It was concerning, especially since she had a waitressing shift that morning at the Liberty Tap Room. Her roommates immediately called the restaurant to check on her, but the staff confirmed that none of them had seen Samantha that morning. This was unusual because Samantha was responsible and would never miss work without giving notice. Her failure to show up without a call raised a major red flag for her roommates that something was seriously wrong. Meanwhile, Greg also woke up and checked his phone, realizing that he hadn't received any messages or calls from Samantha. Panic set in as he called their roommates, who delivered the chilling news that Samantha was missing. Without wasting a second, Greg jumped into his car and sped back to campus, a 2-hour drive that felt like an eternity. On the way, he also called Samantha's parents to break the horrifying news. Their fear was palpable over the phone, and they immediately decided to drive down from New Jersey, facing an agonizing 11-hour journey to find their daughter. Meanwhile, back at the campus, Samantha's roommates, overwhelmed with concern, made the difficult decision to call 911 at around 12:30 in the afternoon to report Samantha as missing. The police swiftly arrived at the girl's apartment after the call to gather updates on everything that had transpired since the previous night.
911, what's your emergency? Hi, we were just gonna call to let you know our friend is missing. What's the address? Where are you located? 1426 Main Street. Is he missing from his address? We went out in 5 Points last night, and she still hasn't made it home. Her phone's dead. We don't think she, went home with, a guy or anything. We're, actually, worried. So, she missed work this morning. Alright, what is her name? Samantha Josephson. Samantha, what's the last name? Josephson. Josephson. And how old is she? 21. And you remember what she was wearing? She was wearing a bright orange shirt with black pants. And y'all was at 5 Points, you say? Last seen at 5 Points? Yes. Alright, we got it. So we're going to send an officer out there and see y'all can make that report, okay? Okay, thank you so much for the help. You're welcome, no problem.
Soon after, Greg also arrived and was eager to assist in the investigation. He shared all he knew with while detectives diligently noted down the information provided by both the roommates and Greg. With a plan in motion, the detectives left the apartment to begin the search for Samantha. As for Samantha's friends and Greg, they were already assuming that the Uber cabs would be tracked down in no time, but no one expected the twist that was about to come. When the police left, the roommates decided to explore Samantha's computer, hoping to find any helpful clues. As they scrolled through Samantha's email, they stumbled upon a shocking discovery. An email from Uber notifying her of a ride cancellation charge. The email indicated that the Uber driver had a charcoal gray 2011 Dodge Charger. This revelation raised a crucial question. If her Uber ride was canceled, then how did Samantha leave that night? To unravel this mystery, her friends decided to return to the Bird Dog and review the CCTV footage of the streets. Thankfully, the manager knew them, so he granted them permission for the investigation. So as they scrutinized the CCTV footage, bustling with people chatting and strolling along the sidewalk, Samantha stood out in her bright orange top, eagerly awaiting her Uber. But to their surprise, instead of the expected ride, she entered into a black Chevy Impala around 2:09 a.m. It was evident that this was a completely different car from the one she was supposed to take. Whose car was it? And why did Samantha get into the wrong one? To gather answers to these questions, they retraced their steps to Montgomery Avenue, knocking on doors and inquiring if anyone had seen the car or Samantha the previous night. But despite their efforts, they came up empty-handed. So the friends wasted no time and headed straight to the police, armed with all the clues they'd gathered. As the authorities reviewed the CCTV footage from every angle, they stumbled upon something unsettling. The same car had been lingering in the area for a considerable amount of time. What's more, after spotting Samantha alone, it made a deliberate U-turn before picking her up. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, which painted a disturbing picture of premeditation. The police quickly issued a bolo, a be on the lookout for any black Chevy Impala, mobilizing law enforcement to stop and investigate any vehicles matching the description. Officers were on high alert, hoping for a lead that could bring Samantha home. However, before they could gather any information about the car or its driver, they received a call that sent a wave of dread through the department. 14 hours after Samantha had gone missing, a disturbing report came in. A man named Anders Sullivan Lee, out turkey hunting with his friend Ryan Knowlton near Tuberville, South Carolina, had made a horrific discovery. He went to an area called New Zion, about 78 miles east of Columbia, and as they walked along a secluded road, Anders noticed something unusual in the bushes. Moving closer, he was horrified to discover a human body covered in blood and immediately called the police at around 4:20 p.m. When the police arrived, investigators quickly began examining the scene. During their initial search, they found several disturbing items scattered on the ground: an envelope, cigarette butts, and beer cans. The body found was that of a young woman covered in blood and mud, with numerous stab wounds all over. The gruesome scene suggested to investigators that she'd been dumped and dragged there. However, the lack of a significant blood trail or other evidence indicated that the crime had occurred elsewhere. Investigators were soon alerted about a missing college student from Columbia, and it didn't take long for them to identify the body as that of Samantha Josephson. Her remains were carefully removed from the scene for further examination. What they'd uncover next would horrify everyone, revealing the full extent of the cruelty she'd suffered. The pathologist who performed the autopsy on Samantha's body stated that using a two-bladed knife, the killer inflicted about 120 stab wounds on Samantha. During the vicious attack, she would have tried to protect herself. One of the stab wounds went completely through her right hand, likely as she raised it to shield herself. Another stab was so forceful, it penetrated her skull and reached her brain. The killer also struck her carotid artery, a major vessel that supplies blood to the head. Many wounds, especially those on her right neck and shoulder, were clustered closely together, suggesting rapid, frenzied stabbing. Samantha also suffered a severed hyoid bone, as well as stab wounds to her face, neck, shoulders, torso, back, lungs, legs, and feet. She bled heavily and, tragically, died within 10 to 20 minutes from her injuries. Who could harbor such hatred for Samantha to kill her so terribly? As Samantha's parents were traveling, the police contacted them with the devastating news of her death. The news of Samantha's death shattered her parents' world, as they were still holding on to hope of finding and bringing home their daughter safely. It only took a few minutes for their lives to be completely changed. Still, to help with the investigation, the police asked Samantha's parents if they had access to her bank account. After some consideration, they provided all the necessary information. This step was crucial for the investigation to progress, as it could provide important clues about Samantha's movements before her tragic end. When investigators looked into her bank account, they made a startling discovery. Her card had been used at 2 different ATMs in the area on March 29, 2019. The first attempt was at 5:45 a.m. at an ATM in Sumter, South Carolina, which was roughly an hour's drive east of 5 Points. Interestingly, Sumter was located halfway between 5 Points and the area where Samantha's body was later found. Just an hour later, at 6:47 a.m., there was a second attempt to use Samantha's bank card. However, both transactions were denied, and no money was withdrawn from Samantha's account. With this new lead, the police contacted Wells Fargo, Samantha's bank, and were connected with a financial crimes investigator to dig deeper into these transactions. That investigator somehow was able to obtain footage from both ATMs, and what they saw was chilling. In the footage, it could be seen clearly that a figure approached the ATM dressed entirely in black. He wore a hoodie, a black jacket, and gloves, with the hood pulled tightly over his head, and something was covering his face. This was a crucial piece of evidence, and the police wasted no time in releasing these images to the public. They urged anyone who recognized the individual or had any information about him to come forward. While they couldn't be certain if this person was Samantha's killer, they believed that he could provide vital clues to solving the case. It didn't take long for them when, at around 3 a.m. on March 30th, 2019, police officers Jeremy Crav and Justin Nissia were patrolling the Five Points area. They spotted a black Chevy Impala cruising around and remembered the bolo issued earlier. Suspecting it might be linked to the case they were investigating, they decided to pull the car over. Initially, the man behind the wheel seemed cooperative. However, when they asked for his identification, he claimed not to have any, which grew suspicious. So, to clear their doubts, they requested him to step out of the car because they detected the smell of marijuana. But things took a sudden turn when the man, instead of complying, attempted to flee from the police.
All right, here's the deal, man. I pulled your car over because it matches the suspect. Get your hand in your pocket. What are you, crazy? Get over here. Hey, get over here! Come on, run! Hey, I'm gonna release the dog! I can't, I was just gonna see if he'll stop. Bravo Mike wearing a gray sweatpants, gray sweatshirt.
Just a few minutes later, the police caught him and brought him back to the car. Meanwhile, another officer searched the vehicle and made some disturbing discoveries. They found a large amount of blood, not only in the trunk, but also all over the passenger seats. This was alarming enough, but then they found Samantha's mobile phone in the glove box, officially linking the man to Samantha for the first time. The search also uncovered liquid bleach, germicidal wipes, and window cleaner, indicating an attempt to clean the vehicle. But the most disturbing details were yet to come. The suspect, quickly taken into custody, was identified as 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland. He had every reason to be worried, as the evidence against him was mounting rapidly. Born in 1995, Nathaniel Rowland grew up in New Zion, about 65 miles southeast of Columbia. He attended East Clarendon School and graduated in 2012. His coach remembered him as a great kid from a very involved family. However, his recent years were less positive. He had several traffic violations, mostly for not wearing a seatbelt, and was charged with having an open container of alcohol in February 2018. But there was a more serious crime linked to Nathaniel. On October 19, 2018, he was allegedly involved in a carjacking at a traffic light. Along with another man, they abducted a woman, assaulted her, forced her to drive to an ATM to withdraw all her money, and then to her home where they stole items, including a PlayStation 4. Hours later, Nathaniel sold some of those stolen items at a pawn shop. In no time, investigators tracked the items back to him, and he was arrested and charged with obtaining goods under false pretenses valued at $2,000 or less. Surprisingly, he wasn't charged with a carjacking or kidnapping, which might explain why he felt emboldened to commit another offense. However, all the remaining doubts vanished when investigators searched Nathaniel's house. In the trash can behind his home, they found blood-stained clothing, cleaning supplies, paper towels, gloves, and a multi-purpose tool, commonly known as a pocket knife, covered in blood. The gloves contained both Samantha's and Nathaniel's DNA. Additionally, the blood on the clothing items and the knife closely matched Samantha's DNA. Despite the mounting evidence, one question lingered. Why was Samantha's DNA never found on Nathaniel himself, and why did he have no cuts or scratches on his body? However, this was soon dismissed. The blood in the back seat and trunk of his car matched Samantha's, and her fingerprints were found on various items in his possession. With all this evidence, it became clear to investigators that Nathaniel was linked to Samantha's horrific murder. The combination of DNA evidence, bloodstains, and fingerprints made it easy for the investigators to connect him to the crime. Finally, Nathaniel was charged with kidnapping, murder, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime. His trial began on July 20th, 2021, and it did not go well for him. Prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including the turkey hunter who'd found Samantha's body, Nathaniel's former girlfriend, Maria Howard, and numerous state law enforcement investigators and other experts. These witnesses provided crucial details and evidence that painted a clear picture of Nathaniel's involvement in Samantha's horrific death. The testimony and evidence presented in court made it difficult for Nathaniel to defend himself against the charges. During the trial, CCTV footage was shown in court revealing Nathaniel's disturbing actions before Samantha's abduction. The footage captured him stalking the Five Points area as early as 25 minutes before he picked up Samantha. He was observed prowling the area multiple times, even circling around the Bird Dog bar, seemingly searching for a potential victim. When Nathaniel saw Samantha alone and attempting to get into another vehicle, mistaking it for her Uber, he seized the opportunity. His Chevy Impala, just 2 cars behind, allowed him to act quickly. After Samantha entered his car, Nathaniel activated the child lock, trapping her inside and preventing her from escaping. The CCTV footage also showed Nathaniel's car traveling southeast, with cell tower data confirming that both Samantha's and Nathaniel's phones were together during this time. This evidence suggested that Samantha was likely killed in the car before her body was transported to the field where she was found. Furthermore, the testimony of turkey hunters describing the location of Samantha's body supported this theory. Additionally, Nathaniel's attempt to withdraw money from ATMs using Samantha's debit card after the murder further incriminated him. These details provided a clear sequence of events leading to Samantha's tragic death. Throughout the entire trial, Nathaniel appeared uneasy, constantly taking notes and showing signs of discomfort. Finally, on July 27, 2021, Nathaniel's fate was sealed when he was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Samantha Josephson.
He's guilty of murder. He's guilty of kidnapping. He's guilty of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
The jury, after deliberating for just an hour, reached their verdict. Nathaniel's actions and the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial left no doubt about his guilt in the horrific crime. Nathaniel received a life sentence for his crimes, but was that enough to bring closure? Samantha, with a promising future ahead of her, had her life tragically cut short by an opportunistic killer whose motives seemed to be financial gain. Samantha's fatal mistake was getting into a vehicle with an unknown driver without verifying their identity first. Her parents were devastated by the loss of their daughter, but from their pain, they established the What's My Name Foundation. The foundation's mission is to educate people about rideshare safety. Samantha's case also led to the passing of Sammy's Law in New Jersey, which enhanced safety protections for both drivers and passengers using rideshare services.
Samantha was by herself. She had absolutely no chance. None. The door was locked. The child safety lock was on. She had absolutely no chance in this. If there's somebody else in the car, there's actually a chance.
This legislation, bearing the same name, was signed into law at the federal level by President Joe Biden on January 5th, 2023. Through these actions, Samantha's legacy lives on, making rideshare services safer for everyone. What are your thoughts on this case? Was really only financial gain the reason behind Samantha's murder? What further steps can be taken to prevent similar incidents and ensure the safety of passengers and drivers using rideshare platforms?
So what are we missing right now that you know of?
My wife's jewelry box. Got all kinds of rings
in there. So somebody had to know where the jewelry box was.
Where do you say your son is?
We don't know.
Well, I call his work, and he's not scheduled to work today.
We called. And he goes to voicemail, you said, when you called him?
Yeah, he's turned off. But his car's gone, but his wallet and his driver's license, there's no money in the wallet.
What you just saw was a routine call which soon turned into one of the most shocking cases ever seen. On June 27, 2016, in the tranquil town of Santa Clara, Utah, officers from the Santa Clara Ivins Police Department responded to a seemingly typical property theft report on Meadowview Circle. Upon arrival, officers were met in the driveway by Kenneth Heisler and his neighbor.
I came home from work. I left at 3:30 this morning to work. I come home about 2:30 today, and pulled into the garage, took a shower, went to the pool, came back into the house. I noticed that my wife's stuff is missing, and the iPad's missing. And I checked the front door. The deadbolt still has a deadbolt on it, and no one has a key for that deadbolt.
Now, more disturbingly, there was something that looked like bloodstains on the garage floor and in the kitchen. Kenneth's son, 32-year-old David Heisler, was nowhere to be found. His car was gone, but his wallet and driver's license were left behind. And the red stains added to the growing alarm. Now, Kenneth continued to guide the officers through his home. He mentioned the fact that David loved movies and video games, pointing out that the TV was still on with the video game paused. It looked as if David had heard something and stepped away mid-game. His phone was left behind, charger in place, and his wallet where he usually kept it. Every clue suggested an abrupt departure. Now initially, Kenneth speculated that his son might have taken some items to a pawn shop, as David had a history of being a bit deceitful for some extra cash. Kenneth showed the officers where the missing iPad and jewelry box were usually kept, adding more pieces to the puzzle. However, the presence of blood in the abandoned wallet contradicted this theory. As disturbing as these findings were, nothing could prepare them for the horrific revelation hidden within the depths of David's life. In order to get a better idea, they needed David to be there. They needed to speak with him. But where was he? Meanwhile, the police had started to get a background on David, trying to see if he had any potential enemies who could harm him or kidnap him, considering the bloodstain in the house. They wanted to know if he had any friends who came over often.
Does he have any friends that come over very often?
He's in a bitter divorce.
Well, yeah, he does.
A custody battle.
He just won custody over his daughter, over the mom. And some of her characters she hangs out with her. Pretty bad.
In jail, drug use.
Yeah.
Now, looking into David's past, the cops uncovered more about his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Kelly Marie Perry, and their now 6-year-old daughter, Mariah Heisler. David and Kelly began dating in 2009. According to David's stepmother, Debbie Heisler, David habitually never introduced his girlfriends. However, one day, she received a call from a family member congratulating that she was going to be a grandma. That's when Debbie decided to meet Kelly. When she met Kelly, she found her to be very polite. Debbie observed that Kelly and David did everything together. When Kelly gave birth to their daughter, Mariah, David was thrilled to be a dad. However, when Mariah was around 3 years old, David and Kelly started having issues, leading to Kelly's eventual departure. Kelly had a history of associating with people involved in criminal activities, including drug use and jail time. The custody battles seemed to have strained the relationship between David and Kelly further. David had been awarded custody of Mariah just 2 weeks before his disappearance. The fact that David had just won custody of Mariah could have been a tipping point. So, did Kelly or someone she knew have a hand in David's case? Or, most importantly, did the custody battle have some role in this? As the officers went into David's past and his relationships, they realized they needed to track down every person connected to this case. They needed to speak with Kelly, her friends, and anyone who might have had a reason to harm David. Christian Wormsley, a St. George private investigator hired by Kenneth to work on behalf of the Heislers in the child custody case, had the same stance. Frank McCard was one of the names that had struck the cops as they went deeper into David's case. Given the custody battle between Kelly and David, it fits perfectly among his potential motives for his disappearance. They'd attempted to locate his vehicle for a welfare check to make sure he's okay, and they also tried pinging his phone to see if they could locate him that way, but it hadn't been powered on at all that day. Meanwhile, Kenneth mentioned that Kelly had called him saying that the cops had called her. She said that David had texted her last night asking her to come over. And Kelly's statement didn't seem to be true. Both Kenneth and his wife couldn't digest why David would call Kelly over to his house. The cops checked the pawn database. Usually it takes a couple of days for it to update, but he only used to pawn at one place. And when they contacted that pawn shop, they said they hadn't seen him that day of June 27, 2016. Debbie, David's stepmother, had posted on Facebook about his disappearance, expressing her concern. And throughout the times, she mentioned a gut feeling that something was wrong. The following day, officers returned to the residence to continue their investigation. One officer pointed out a chair with David's hair on it, raising concerns about the presence of electrical tape. He noted how the tape was pulled and that there were long hairs on it, suggesting they take it as evidence. Kenneth remained worried, stating he hadn't been able to contact David on his phone. He shared that after talking with the police the previous night, he spoke with Kelly, who claimed that David had texted her at 3:49 Monday morning, asking if she was coming over.
What are you thinking at this point? I still haven't been able to get hold of David on his phone. After I talked to you last night, I did talk with Kelly, and she said that David was texting her that night and wanted her to come over. She said she wouldn't.
Went to the house and talked to her today. There's a text from David at 3:49 Monday morning asking, you coming over or what or not? If not, I'm going to bed.
Yeah. That's basically what she told me. She said that they were texting. David wanted her to come over, but she didn't.
Right.
The officer noted the blood in the garage, suggesting someone might have been thrown into a trunk, but clarified that the blood splatter didn't indicate a high-impact injury. It seemed more consistent with a bloody nose or a small cut rather than a significant injury. Given the circumstances, the officers decided to issue another attempt to locate David's vehicle and list him in the National Crime Information Center database as missing. They explained that if any contact was made with David anywhere, he'd be flagged and they'd be notified. Also, both Kenneth and Debbie noted David's unusual silence, especially since he'd been in regular communication with Mariah via FaceTime and Skype. The officers returned 30 minutes later with the detective to collect a blood sample from the garage. The officers asked if there'd been blood there before, and Kenneth confirmed there hadn't been.
Had there been blood here before?
No, it wasn't there Saturday. It wasn't there Sunday morning at 3:35 a.m. when Kenny went to work. It was there when he was.
Now, putting it all together, Kenneth, Debbie the neighbor, and the officers were contemplating a theory about what might have happened to David given the bloodstains and his abrupt departure from the house. They speculated that David might have opened the door to let Kelly in, only to be ambushed by someone hiding around the corner. Kenneth suggested that this could have happened in the middle of the night after he left for work at 3:35 a.m. He confirmed that David was still there when he left, as the car was in the driveway and the video game was on pause. They guessed that David was overpowered quickly, which might explain the blood splatter near the door. At this time, the intruders might have freaked out after attacking David, grabbed some valuables, and then moved David's body to the garage. They speculated that the intruders then backed the car into the garage, loaded David into the trunk, and drove off, leaving the house locked up behind them. But despite their fears, Kenneth expressed a hope that David might have taken some belongings and left on his own, although he admitted that their private investigator was less confident. He believed that David's car might already be in Las Vegas, with David possibly in the trunk, hinting at a more dire situation. The Heisler residence is situated in a cul-de-sac, being the only two ways to exit the neighborhood. This added another layer of complexity to their theories, as it limited the possible routes the intruders could have taken when they left with David in his car. So, in order to look into it, detectives had obtained surveillance video from the two directions David's car could have traveled. David drove a black 2002 Saturn sedan, and at 4:56 a.m., a sedan matching his vehicle was seen exiting the neighborhood. The video was grainy, so detectives couldn't determine the occupants of the vehicle. Next on the investigators' list was the person with whom David had last communicated. They obtained call logs from Kenneth, revealing that David had been messaging his ex-girlfriend, Kelly. Kenneth left for work at 3:30 a.m., and David sent his last message at 3:56 a.m. The timing of the messages was significant because exactly 1 hour later, David's car was seen leaving the neighborhood. 2 days after David went missing, Captain Rich Rogers and Lieutenant Jaron Studley went to Kelly's house to discuss David's disappearance. Kelly explained that she had sole custody of their daughter until September 2014, when she got married and moved to Cedar City. She married James Perry, and David came to her house a week after the move, taking their daughter on an ex parte motion of custody. They had recently had a trial related to this custody battle. Kelly claimed that Debbie, David's stepmother, had pushed David to fight for custody because Debbie didn't want Kelly to move Mariah to Wyoming.
So tell us about custody just real quick so we can try and make sure we can answer your questions.
So I had full custody of her until September of 2014. Yeah, 2014. September 2014, I got married and moved to Cedar City.
Who did you marry?
I married James Perry.
James Perry.
And David came to my house a week after we moved to Cedar City and took her on an ex parte motion of custody, and we just barely had our trial.
Who's pushing for all this? Is it Debbie?
It's Debbie. Debbie's the one that has pushed all this because I was trying to move home to Wyoming where my family's at.
Mm-hmm.
And Debbie wasn't okay with that because then she wouldn't have Mariah close by. She pushed David into, well, you can't let her take her. You can't let her take her. David actually got kicked out of his parents' house Easter of 2013, I believe.
For what?
They fight all the time. Him and his parents are constantly back and forth with each other over something because he lives at home and his parents want control over him. Mm-hmm. They treat him like he's a teenager again, you know? So Debbie told him to get out of her house on Easter.
Kelly recounted that David had been kicked out of his parents' house in Easter 2013 and had come to stay with her for about 2 weeks. They'd split up a couple of months before, but Kelly allowed David to stay because he watched Mariah while she worked. David had written a letter agreeing to Kelly taking Mariah to Wyoming, but during the court hearing, he claimed not to know about the letter. Kelly further asserted that Debbie manipulated David by threatening him with the loss of his place to live, car, and phone if he allowed Kelly to take Mariah. Despite David being 30 years old, Kelly described the ongoing conflict as being between her and Debbie rather than between her and David. Since David had obtained custody, Kelly had been on supervised visitation, which she believed was due to concerns that she might coach Mariah or take off with her. Kelly expressed frustration, stating that she just wanted to be a mother to Mariah and that Debbie's interference had made the situation extremely difficult. She also mentioned that David owed her nearly $4,000 in child support back when he took custody. Kelly described ongoing conflicts with Debbie, who had frequently threatened to withhold visitation. During a recent trip to New York, Debbie had not provided the court-ordered itinerary, and Kelly had only been able to speak with Mariah twice. Kelly emphasized that the court had given David sole physical custody with visitation rights for her, but Debbie's actions continued to create significant tension and obstacles. The officer suggested that she stop posting on Facebook, explaining that people were going to be mean and say nasty things, and they'd form opinions based on external influences regardless of their validity. Kelly said she just wanted to stop the constant bullying from Debbie and her family, noting that Debbie probably enjoyed seeing her upset. She expressed frustration about the situation, highlighting that a little girl was involved and needed to feel safe and loved by her family. She felt excluded from Mariah's life just because she was no longer with David. She also recounted that on June 21st, 2016, before Debbie and Mariah left for New York, David had allowed her to spend time with Mariah during lunchtime. However, after Debbie left, David began texting Kelly, asking her to hang out, go to the movies, or spend the night, which she found unusual as they didn't have that kind of relationship anymore. The detectives asked her to keep the text messages from David and mentioned the importance of establishing a timeline and alibi, noting that David missing work, his phone being turned off, and his wallet being left behind were major red flags. She was upset that Debbie had unilaterally decided to stop her visitation rights, which she felt was unjust and had exacerbated the already palpable tension. She also shared that Kenneth had last seen David before going to bed on Sunday night, June 26, 2016. She also mentioned that David was a gamer who stayed up late. Despite her concerns and efforts to reach out, Kelly had not heard back from David by 11 p.m. that evening, so she'd sent him another text, hoping he might respond. The officer asked her if she was with anyone on Sunday the 26th. Kelly confirmed that she'd been with her roommate, Tammy Freeman. Tammy, who was present, confirmed her identity and vouched for Kelly's alibi. Next, the officer inquired about David's mental health, asking if he'd ever mentioned hurting himself. According to Kelly, David had never expressed such thoughts to her, but noted he had moments of anger, particularly involving his stepmom. He was generally unexcitable. Throughout the conversation, she asked why people might suspect her involvement in David's disappearance. She admitted the possible suspicion due to the recent custody issues, but stressed that she didn't feel she'd lost custody of Mariah since David had physical custody since September 2014. She had legal visitation rights, and despite Debbie's interference, she was always determined to see her daughter. Now, the conversation shifted to hypotheticals, where the officer asked if anyone might have harmed David on her behalf. Kelly denied having any such person in her life, including stalkers or boyfriends. She also denied the allegations of being at David's house and banging on the window the night he disappeared. a claim which was supposedly originating from David's texts. After speaking with Kelly, detectives checked the Utah pawn database and discovered that David last pawned something a few days before his disappearance. They also investigated the GPS tracker on David's car, which last pinged at his home early on Monday, June 27, 2016, and later in Arizona, 45 miles south of his house. The area was basically a harsh desert environment and was clearly unsuitable for survival without proper provisions. The detectives followed the GPS pings but found no sign of David or his car until July 1st, 2016, when they received a call about a vehicle matching David's description in Beaver Dam, Arizona. They confirmed the vehicle was David's but found no one inside. A spent 9mm casing was discovered behind the driver's seat, raising further concerns. Debbie had informed Mariah about David's disappearance, assuring her that many people were looking for him. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Studley reviewed Kelly's social media, noting her long-standing custody battle with David. Friends of Debbie suggested Kelly and her boyfriend Frank might be involved in David's disappearance. What followed next would completely alter the course of the case. One message particularly caught the detectives' attention, as it mentioned getting David while he was playing video games, a detail which was not publicly disclosed. Based on these messages, detectives obtained a warrant for Kelly's cell phone. They met her at the courthouse, where she was applying for temporary guardianship of Mariah, and informed her about the warrant. Reluctantly, Kelly handed over her phone, which was sent to Utah Tech for a forensic analysis. The lab used brute force to bypass the passcode and extracted all data, revealing that Kelly had deleted some text messages. And so, the detectives invited Kelly to the station to further investigate what she might be hiding, as David was last heard from in the early morning hours of Monday, June 27th, 2016.
And again, the reason why we think that you need to be talked to is because you were the last person to text David on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
You were the mother of his child, and he's missing.
Was anybody with you at the court hearing?
Frank drove me there.
Frank who?
Frank McCard.
You made mention that yours and he relationship is not a romantic, that's correct?
That's correct.
So again, you tell us the relationship between you and Frank.
Me and Frank are, I guess you would say, best friends. I mean.
During the interrogation, Kelly was asked about her relationship with Frank McCard, who was considered a prime suspect in the case. The officer asked Kelly about her statement regarding going to the house again. And again, Kelly clarified that she didn't actually go to the house. When the officer asked Kelly if Frank was with her at that time, she appeared to be a bit flustered in her response.
Frank was not around because I'm trying to think, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Thursday, somewhere around like Thursday or Friday was when he moved out.
So as far as you know, you don't think he's been at the house since that night, Friday night? He wasn't there when you were sending texts, right? No. He wasn't there that Saturday night?
No.
At this point, Kelly had started to break, and the officers were quite confident about Frank playing a major role in David's disappearance, especially with Frank accusing David of behaving immorally with his own daughter. All they needed was a slight nod from Kelly. Using an emotional approach, the officers decided to use Kelly's relationship with her daughter to encourage her to admit her and Frank's involvement. They made it clear that if Kelly didn't come clean about what happened, she would risk losing custody or access to her daughter. The detectives had continuously asked her to share what she knew about David's disappearance. They presented two possibilities before her. Either Kelly was directly involved in planning David's disappearance, or someone else acted alone and informed her later. Their goal was to push Kelly to provide any information she had. They stressed on the fact that her cooperation could influence the investigation and might lessen her legal consequences later on if she's found guilty.
You don't need to protect Frank. Frank's a big boy.
No, I know that.
Well, tell us what happened. Please, I'm asking you. Not even necessarily that a family needs closure, but at the same time, this has got to be eating you up. This isn't you. I think a bad choice was made. A really bad choice was made. But guess what? It wasn't your idea, and we know that.
So help us out. Tell us
What happened to David?
I don't know what happened to David.
What have you heard? There's two stories, so it's either you were 100% involved and you orchestrated this, or somebody did it on his own and then told you about it. What happened?
Help us out now so we can help you out. So we can protect you and your daughter.
That girl needs at least one parent in her life.
I know.
So what are you doing? What is so hard about this? We're not stupid, Kelly. I think you know that.
I know you're not.
You're not either. A bad choice was made.
It's not yellow. It's like a golden.
What happened to David? The last text that you sent to him at 3:46. What happened after 3:46, Kelly?
Pink, white,
I promise the way you're feeling right now, I'm not even going to pretend to imagine.
beige, light beige, next to.
I can't imagine how you've probably been feeling all week, but I bet some of that weight on your shoulders will be lifted once we start to talk about it.
I'm just scared.
Of her. Kelly, who are you scared of?
Scared of not being with Brian.
Well, I promise you, if we keep going down the road
It will be that way. If you were involved, there's still things we can do to help you
I
out.
promise you there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
You just gotta open that
If you
door.
don't help, none of those doors will be open for you.
Finally, after consistently keeping up the pressure, Kelly had decided to come clean and open up. Now that the officers had a vague understanding of what happened that day, Kelly seemed to assert that she was unaware of any intention to harm David or of Frank's involvement in any harm. She maintained that she was completely kept in the dark about it afterwards. The officers asked Kelly if she wanted to talk to the county attorney or not. In response, she said she just wanted to know what was going to happen next.
I just want to know what's going to happen.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what's going to happen.
At this point in time, you're not free to leave.
Where are we going?
We're going out to jail, okay?
Based on Kelly's statements, it was clear that Frank, also known as Hollywood, was the last person to see David alive. And the detectives had gone to arrest and bring Frank in at the earliest.
Finger, man! I'm sorry. Yeah! Squeezing my finger, man! Sorry, sir. I will take it off. I'm sorry.
During the arrest on June 27, 2016, Frank did show some level of resistance, and the cops did have a hard time bringing him in. In fact, Frank had a long history of criminal activities and was known to use and sell drugs. Now that Frank was in custody, detectives had decided to interrogate him at the jail. Despite initially denying and providing inconsistent statements, the officers pressed for comprehensive details, stressing the gravity of Frank's actions and the potential consequences. And so, another officer walked in to speak with Frank.
What would you do? I get it. I'm there with you. All right. No, I'm saying I shouldn't have done it, but I did, and I take full responsibility. So you drive out the road to mile marker 56, 57. What's David doing during this time? Has he got the pillowcase on or off? He's having a conversation, actually. I'm sorry? He's having a conversation, kind of. I asked him yesterday, you ever touch your daughter? No.
Now, throughout the conversation, Frank had expressed his frustration, mentioning that the law seemed inactive regarding David's actions towards the young girl, describing it as unfair. He admitted regret, stating that he shouldn't have done that, but all in a righteous tone. During their interrogation, Frank recounted driving to mile marker 56. David, who wasn't wearing the pillowcase, was speaking with him. When asked if he believed David had harmed his daughter, Frank explained that his daughter had disclosed the abuse to her mother and authorities, including DCFS and counselors, but no action had been taken initially. The detectives took this as a motive behind David's disappearance. Having learned the location where Frank left David, investigators drove the route described, which matched the GPS pings. Along the roadside was a lone tree, identified by Frank as the last place he saw David alive. Despite an extensive search of the area, detectives found no trace of David or indications of his whereabouts. They did recover a pair of glasses and a blood-soaked pillowcase. To know more about David's kidnapping, detectives had turned to forensic analysis. The Utah Tech Forensic Lab performed a chip-off extraction of Kelly's phone, a risky procedure involving removing the memory chip from the phone's circuit board to extract data directly. The extraction was successful, allowing detectives to access messages and Kelly's search history. Among other things, Kelly had searched for information on child custody in cases where the sole custodian goes missing. Text messages between Kelly, Frank, and Kelly's roommate Tammy revealed discussions leading up to David's kidnapping. These communications aligned with their recent statements to investigators. Detective Studley concluded that Kelly sought sympathy and support from both Tammy and Frank to recover her daughter by any means necessary. Surveillance videos from casinos visited by the trio provided further evidence. Frank and Kelly were seen entering a casino together, followed by Frank leaving with a shaved head approximately 3 weeks after David's abduction on August 18, 2016. The case seemed to be nearing resolution, but one more disturbing discovery was yet to come. 3 weeks later, authorities were notified about a discovery in the Arizona desert. A body was discovered by a Bureau of Land Management geologist in the Mount Trumbull region of the Arizona Strip, Mojave County, Arizona, on August 18, 2016. The geologist came across the body between 3:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. while en route to inspect a rock formation in the area. The discovery was promptly reported to the Mojave County Sheriff's Office around 5 p.m. Officials from multiple agencies, including the Mojave County Sheriff's Office, Santa Clara Evans Police Department, Washington County Attorney's Office, and BLM responded to the scene. The body, which appeared to be badly decomposed, was found approximately 4 miles from where Frank had claimed to have left David alive. Santa Clara Evans Police Captain Rich Rogers stated that preliminary findings indicated the body was likely that of David based on photographic evidence and visual examination of the scene. The body was transported to the Mojave County Medical Examiner's Office in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, for further examination. With a substantial amount of evidence against them, Francis McCard, Kelly Perry, and Tammy Freeman were about to be brought to justice. On May 3, 2018, Frank appeared before Judge Eric Ludlow in 5th District Court for a preliminary hearing on charges of aggravated kidnapping, aggravated burglary, and vehicle theft. Santa Clara Evans Police Sergeant Jaron Studley testified during the hearing that Frank admitted going to David's home on the morning of June 27th with Kelly Perry and Tammy Renee Freeman, who was arrested on July 9, 2016, for her alleged involvement in the crime. Studley stated that Frank's intention was to scare Heisler. After nearly 3 years of court proceedings, including scheduled and canceled trials, guilty pleas, and extensive documentation filed in the 5th District Court, the case concluded. On June 4, 2019, Kelly, the final defendant, was sentenced to serve 35 years in federal prison to be followed by 5 years of supervised release. She'll also have to pay $1.5 million awarded to David's family in a separate civil court ruling. Frank was sentenced to 75 years in custody, while Tammy initially received a sentence of 1 to 15 years for each of the 3 counts related to David's disappearance in the Utah State Prison. On February 27, 2018, Tammy escaped harsher federal and out-of-state charges by admitting to lesser counts related to the kidnapping that resulted in David Heisler's death. She pleaded guilty to 3 second-degree felony charges: aggravated kidnapping, aggravated burglary, and vehicle theft. Her jury trial, initially scheduled to begin on February 21, 2018, was canceled when the parties reached a resolution in the case. As part of the plea deal, Deputy Washington County Attorney Zachary Wayland stated that both the Arizona and federal murder and kidnapping charges against Tammy would be dropped. Judge Jeffrey C. Wilcox confirmed in 5th District Court that neither the state of Arizona nor the federal government would pursue any charges based on her pleas. In exchange for Tammy's guilty pleas, the state agreed to amend the kidnapping and burglary charges to second-degree felonies. Tammy also agreed to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation report and to avoid any direct or indirect contact with the Heisler family, including Kelly and David's daughter, Mariah. During Kelly's sentencing, she requested to serve her sentence in a women's facility closest to Cheyenne, Wyoming, to facilitate family visitation, a request that was granted by the judge. At Kelly's sentencing hearing, David's 9-year-old daughter, Mariah, expressed her feelings in a letter read by her grandmother, Debbie Heisler. In the letter, Mariah expressed anger towards her mother for killing her father, describing her father as the best, and expressing sadness over discovering blood in their home upon returning from vacationing. She recounted feeling mad and sad as she learned her father was gone. Mariah's letter stated that her mother's actions were solely responsible for her father's death, expressing how her mother's behavior wasn't that of a loving and caring mother. She ended the letter with a strong message of hatred towards her mother, emphasizing that what Kelly did was wrong and mentioning that she and her family were safe when her mother was in jail. During the hearing, Kelly spoke briefly, admitting to using drugs to numb her pain and revealing her struggles with addiction since she was 12 years old. She expressed profound regret over losing the ability to be a mother to her daughters and claimed she never intended for David to die, expressing a desire to bring him back if she could. Debbie spoke about the profound pain her family continues to endure over the tragic loss of her son David. David suffered in the scorching Arizona desert after being left there without food or water, likely for days. The family couldn't even have an open casket funeral due to the severe decomposition caused by the harsh desert conditions. They had to relinquish parts of David's body for forensic analysis, which added more to their anguish. The darker fact is that they still don't know exactly how David died. Meanwhile, the plea deals allowed his perpetrators leniency, while David had no chance to negotiate his fate. Before we end this video, we want to express our heartfelt condolences to David Heisler and his family and loved ones. The family's pain is enduring and permanent. The ongoing impact on their lives, including the emotional toll on David's daughter Mariah, who has been deeply affected by losing her father. What do you think? Was the sentence too lenient? Look at this short clip. Listen closely. The scream you just heard was anonymously recorded days before a gruesome incident was about to surface. On August 13th, 2020, Elk River Police and EMS discovered an 8-year-old girl, Autumn Hallow, unresponsive in her apartment after they were called for an emergency regarding a minor. The medical team declared her dead on the spot, but in addition, they noted unusual patterns of the compromised appearance of Autumn, and the patterns were trying to tell a story. It was like she'd left a trail of secrets behind her. The suspicion raised on the scene was about to see unprecedented turns as the investigation began.
I have to sleep on the floor with no pillow and blanket, or I get soap in my mouth. I feel safe at. What? No? Why do you say no?
Little did anyone know this story was about to unveil some terrifying details hidden within the walls of her own home. Autumn's father, Brett Hallow, and her stepmother, Sarah Hallow, informed the detectives that they discovered her unconscious in the bathtub 40 minutes after she'd gone in to take a shower. Her fingers had turned blue by the time the police arrived, implying she'd been dead for quite some time. Autumn's deceased body was collected from the apartment and sent for autopsy. In the meantime, questioning the Hallow family was a foregone conclusion. Sarah Hallow told the police that Autumn had been eating less and less for the last few days. She said she'd consulted a doctor about this, but being on medication for shoulder injury herself, Sarah said she wasn't able to pay proper attention to the matter. Autumn's father, Brett Hallow, was also present in the house. Both Brett and Sarah stood up to their mutual statement about Autumn going for a shower and not coming back for quite some time. By now, detectives had already raised suspicions in the story, and they were yet to proceed with a detailed investigation. Autumn Lee Hallow was the daughter of Brett Hallow and Kelsey Cruz, who met each other in Ivan Sand High School, Elk River, and became life partners. Kelsey was 17 years old at the time. The couple had their firstborn child, Noah, in 2010, and just 3 months later, Kelsey was pregnant with Autumn. Autumn had a 6-week premature birth on August 24th, 2011, and grew up to be one sunshine of a little girl.
I am what I am. I don't want praise. I don't want pity.
John. Mommy, I saw John.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, wait, John.
Her creativity surpassed her age, as she loved to write and create pieces of art all the time. She was deeply fond of gymnastics and loved showing everyone the new moves she learned. The girl had a natural heart full of love for everyone. Unfortunately, Brett turned out to be the unfaithful one in the marriage. The relationship between Brett and Kelsey turned sour, and they ended up getting divorced in 2013 after 4 years of marriage. From that point, Brett and Kelsey were sharing the custody of Autumn and Noah on a weekly basis. Everything was going well despite the broken marriage until Brett met a single mother named Sarah K. Nasby. After dating for around a year, they ended up getting married in 2017. Sarah already had a girl from her previous relationship. Brett and Sarah went on to have 2 boys of their own after their marriage. With Noah and Autumn visiting from time to time, Brett and Sarah soon had a house full of 5 children. When Autumn passed away in August 2020, she'd been living with her father and stepmother for several months. Suspicions of the detectives thickened when they decided to interview someone who was not old enough to build lies yet, the 6-year-old son of Brett and Sarah, and along with him, Sarah's 10-year-old daughter. However, they had no idea just how sickening the revelations would be, making this one of the most heartbreaking cases they'd ever encountered. When asked about their stepsister Autumn, they hinted at strange scenarios that couldn't have been made up by children. They told the police that Autumn had been hungry for many days. Whenever she tried to get or steal food, Mommy and Daddy tied her hands with a belt or a long gray sweatshirt and made her stay up all night. Then, whenever she had an accident in her pants, she was made to sleep in a red sleeping bag with her hands tied with only her head outside the bag. Sarah's daughter told the police that the day Autumn passed away, she heard her screaming, and after that, a loud thud from the bathroom. Later, she said she saw blood inside the bathroom. When searching the apartment, law enforcement found the items that the children had described the Hallows had used to tie Autumn up, along with the red sleeping bag. The black hooded sweatshirt and gray shirt were located in a towel and were covered in vomit. Meanwhile, the autopsy report of Autumn Hallow came and revealed some major bodily dysfunctions. Autumn had asphyxial injuries, which meant that she was deprived of oxygen to the extent that it could have caused unconsciousness or even death. She had a number of punctures on her head. The girl also had suffered internal bleeding in her abdomen area and had a perforated bowel, leaking contents into the abdomen, which could cause severe pain. The statements of the children were enough to mark a circle of suspicion around Brett and Sarah Hallow. The deceased body of little Autumn was lying in the funeral home when her real mother, Kelsey Cruz, met and touched her for the first time in several months. Kelsey couldn't identify Autumn, as she was not the Autumn who Kelsey had last met. Her head was shaved. She looked so tiny under the sheets, being so extremely thin and frail. Kelsey saw wound marks on her scalp, her face, and multiple other parts of the body. At the time of her death, Autumn had a smidgen of a weight of around 33 pounds. This was the natural weight of a 4.5-year-old. A healthy kid of her age should have easily weighed around 70 pounds. During her funeral, the funeral home suggested to Kelsey that they should have a closed casket because of how emaciated the girl was, but Kelsey denied this. She had to buy a wig for Autumn to cover her shaved head. For the last few months, Kelsey had been afraid about the possibility of a horrific fate as long as the girl was with Brett and Sarah. It turned out that Kelsey had moved heaven and earth to reach Autumn in the last 6 to 8 months, but somehow she was restricted in her efforts to reach Autumn. Kelsey stated that it all started when Sarah came into the picture. When Brett married Sarah in 2017, for some reason, she soon built up a strong hatred for Kelsey. Sarah in the past had a history of violence. She was charged in 2013 with 2 counts of 4th-degree felonies, once for physically assaulting a police officer, and on yet another instance for assaulting a police officer by throwing an unmentioned bodily fluid on him. Apart from that, Sarah had multiple restraining orders against various people. She had won against her own parents. She filed and got one against Kelsey when Kelsey was merely coming over to deliver a gift from Brett's mom. Sarah complained that Kelsey ripped off the stitches on her shoulder injury. A restraining order was issued to Kelsey without hearing her side of the story. At one point, Sarah, wanting more control over the family, convinced the court that Brett had disabilities that led him to have seizures whenever he met Kelsey. Although there was no known record of that, the conversation between Kelsey and Brett was restricted to pass only through Sarah. Brett also ended up blocking Kelsey's number. One Sunday, when the kids came home to Kelsey, Noah had swelling and bruises on his whole left cheek. Brett told Kelsey that Noah had fallen while playing with one of his half-siblings and hit his face. Later that night, Autumn told Kelsey that Sarah had hit Noah for having an accident in his pants. Noah confirmed this. He said Sarah hit him and fell backwards to hit the bed frame. Kelsey questioned Sarah, to which she replied she had merely grazed his lips with 2 fingertips and he fell backwards. Kelsey informed Elk River PD, who passed the matter to Child Protection Services. The matter, however, saw no accountable action. There was another instance when Noah was spotted with bruises. He had a darkened eye with bruises on his chin that looked like fingerprints. This time, Noah's school counselor reported the injuries to Child Protection. CPS interviewed both kids at school, and the kids did give signs of some of father's house.
With Dell's powerful and scalable storage solutions, we've taken the complexity out of managing multiple...
Do you feel safe at? What? No? Why do you say no? I have to sleep on the floor with no pillow and blankets, or I get soap in my mouth. Who would you talk to if you had any worries? Anybody?
CPS decided to let Kelsey keep Noah for a few extra days. However, the investigation was closed within 2 weeks as Noah's story changed. And he was made to resume his visits to his dad's, and this time, more custody days were provided to Brett and Sarah. Kelsey was also the one providing child support, as Brett and Sarah were both unemployed at that point. She had to pay for their food, clothes, education, and medical needs. Moreover, Brett and Sarah brought Kelsey back to court to have her charged with contempt for not sending Noah to their house. Judge Mary Younger charged Kelsey and removed the kids from her care for 5 consecutive weeks. When the kids were at Brett and Sarah's, they weren't allowed to talk with their mother. Kelsey was only able to see them in school at lunch, and she used to go there for as many days as she could. This was also attempted to be stalled by Brett and Sarah so that Kelsey didn't have any contact with her kids. Kelsey at that point couldn't afford an attorney to argue against the accusations. In September 2019, Kelsey didn't get Noah back for days after a pending Sunday exchange. She called the police for a welfare check. The police officer talked to Brett and Sarah, saw Noah, and reported back to Kelsey that Noah was fine. When Kelsey saw Noah after all, she was shocked out of her wits. She noted bruises all over his face, back, belly button, and legs. On the contrary, little Noah said he got bruises on his temple because a kid kicked him while on the playground. He said his foot was swollen because it got stuck in a hole, and his stomach injury came from falling off while he was playing. He didn't seem to have answers for his other injuries. Kelsey took him to the emergency room, and they made a report to CPS, who didn't call Kelsey back for a few days. When CPS did come checking, they interviewed Noah